and welcome to a slightly scary Halloween edition of of Codified Security Office Hours. How warm are you, Steve, in that costume? I'm feeling quite toasty.
I'm not Steve. I am the Red Skull,
He is the Reds.
the leader of Hydra, who now lives somewhere weird with a soul stone and stuff and beer.
I do not have as much branding with my costume, so I am just going as Weird Halloween Monkey.
At least I can figure out what that is. What, Barak? What are you?
Someone from the USSR, I guess.
Okay,
Comrade.
you are a Russian hacker.
I like that. I like that.
Although
Oh,
I do
Got to
know.
go to my roots.
all up in your supply chains.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You have a wonderful background.
Although I feel I have innovated a little bit. That with office hours, there should always be a beverage on hand, and the mask was causing me a bit of an issue. So lo, the straw.
Oh, and are you wearing a green can? Drinking from a green can by any chance?
I am drinking from a green can of Heineken, which is pretty
Oh,
cool.
it's a ghostly Heineken. It's good. Oh, look, it's got now. It's put it over the pumpkin. Now it's a pumpkin themed Heineken. Look at that.
That's pretty cool. That's a completely unintentional side effect of the green screen, but very cool nonetheless.
That's super cool.
So, how are we all doing today?
Pretty good.
Yeah. My wife tried to kill me last night with a nearly toxic mushroom. But hey, we all bounce back. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I'm here. My complexion. I'm a little flushed still from it, and I've lost a bit of weight. You can tell.
Yeah, you're looking slightly more ghoulish than usual. It must be said.
A little more ghoulish. My cheekbones are popping though. I mean, look at them. I'm gonna get up.
I don't know. I like it. It feels refreshing versus the regular look.
A little more attractive than I used to be.
Yeah, it's doing all right. More mushrooms from your wife. Maybe not a bad thing.
Don't tell her.
But yes, welcome everyone to episode 14, I think. I've lost my head, of Codified Security Office Hours. We've got a bit of a special one today, minus the stupid costumes, because it is all about the community Hacktoberfest contributions. We have had an insane month so far, and I say so far because there's still a couple of days left, but we've had an insane month so far of PRs, discussions, kind of conversations in Slack about features. I know that Barak and Steve and I had a really interesting conversation with a heavy Checkov user yesterday. So potentially more PRs to come right at the last bit of the Hacktoberfest month. So yeah, we want to use this episode to obviously go vastly off track. If you have comments or questions or things you want to throw in the Twitch chat or the YouTube chat, and we'll kind of pivot off onto those. It's your community call, but at the same time, if not, we just wanted to go through and highlight some of the awesome contributions that have been made during Hacktoberfest, and stickers and shirts and all kinds of good swag will be winging its way to people as a token of appreciation for all the hard community work that's gone in here. So I know that Steve and Barak, you've picked some of your favorites. What else has been going on this week before we jump into those? Any other industry news that you want to bring up, or should we get straight into the awesome contributions?
So much to talk about. Industry contributions. I'll throw one out there, but I'm not going to show anything. Because of one of my past lives prior to Bridgecrew, I worked with the team that created this thing called BSIM. It's like a billing security and maturity model. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It was created by a company called Cigital before they were acquired. And that's when people always talk about how security or DevOps outnumber security by 100 to 1, it comes from this report, because the stats were created by measuring over 100 companies and seeing like what their staffing looked like. So this is the port that sort of sources that detail. And the 12th one just came out, which is cool because it shows a huge uptake in the use of containers in Kubernetes and obvious notions. And then, of course, the security tools and attention to detail on supply chain and bill of materials, which relates to what we're talking about today. So that came out 2 days ago, and that is very relevant.
Interesting.
That's interesting. How did you use to solve the problem of supply chain attacks 5 or 6 or 7 years ago before it became trendy? What did you use?
Nobody did.
To mitigate the truth. Nobody did.
No, nobody saw. We still haven't solved supply chain attacks. Not really. We created big lists of things that nobody did anything with. So, we're getting better, moving onward and upward. There wasn't really.
Right.
I don't think there really. I would hesitate to say that, with the exception of things like SigStore now, which are focusing specifically on signing every motion, like when Entoto tried to do, but was difficult to scale. It really wasn't. But we weren't really seeing evidence of attacks that like we are now, that are essentially focusing on supply chain. Maybe the baddies just didn't really have that attack vector in their brains yet, so we were lucky. If we can
What about
we could go back and attack things.
that fits with the Red Skull custom. What about things like Artifactory or Nessus? Doesn't they solve the problem?
Artifactory and Nessus. Artifactory is just a repository, and Nessus is an outside-in scanner. So Nessus is very cool, but it's not a supply chain specifically.
Oh, sorry, I meant Nexus, the Artifactory competitor.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I know what you mean. Sorry, I thought you said Nessus. You know what? That's not the first time I've been confused by that.
Shout out to Nessus. # blast from the past.
Yeah. But those tools are like Black Duck in a way, like X-Ray, that are looking for what you are using inside your software in terms of it's the same thing almost like what container scanning is currently doing, looking to see what's traveling, what was previously concealed from tools like that. So all it's doing is telling you that you've got this bill of materials, which is good, and you have these associated vulnerabilities, which is good. But if you can tinker with the supply chain, then you can potentially swap out this, that, and the other thing after you've done those scans. So how do we solve that, right? Now we're talking.
Yeah, I always thought that Artifactory solved some of the problem, because if you tell your CI/CD not to download directly from the internet, but to go through Artifactory, which is scanned by X-Ray, you can validate if you have a known CV in your code, because you control the entire supply chain that way. But I can understand why things can get through.
Oh, totally. I mean, I don't like talking about like the way the SolarWinds one was done was an injection of a malicious library after everything's been signed off and approved and pulled from the right place. So then you've got to look at whether you're signing, like, the thing you expected to have as your outcome is the thing that you expected to be there after it's all built. And it's very difficult to, it's still difficult to do that.
It is. All right.
Cool. We are already off on a tangent.
They're the best ways, though. Without tangents, this office hours really wouldn't be worth streaming, would it? Tangents are good.
Tangents are our friend.
Long live tangents. However, maybe not long live crazy Halloween monkey hat. I feel
you're taking off the monkey hat.
I feel it might be time. I would have got away with it too if it wasn't for those pesky kids.
Oh, hold on, man.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a full skull. Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, you can see the whole.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's cool. Where's that from?
Oh my god, it was a white skull. I actually spray painted it red.
That's cool. I like it. You managed to did you have to put masking tape over the teeth?
Yes, I did. Attention to detail.
By the way, just as a comment, keeping like the black hooded robe with the regular face. You look like Knight Templar meets like, you know, Return of the Sith kind of vibe. It's a good look.
Still in costume.
It's a good look. Quite like that.
All right, I'll get on.
There's many franchises you could just say you've turned up as for a party, and people would be like, "Yeah, sure, I buy it."
And yet, all owned by Disney still.
And yet, all owned by Disney. Yeah, pretty much. Maybe their costume department just really enjoys reusing like black dressing gowns with hoods.
Yeah,
who knows?
We're off track. Off track.
We are off track, right? Back to the contributions. And to kind of take us through a couple of contributions first, I don't really mind who goes first. We've all kind of picked a couple of our favorites. I know, Barak, there's kind of a load of performance improvement work that's gone on as well during this month. Not necessarily directly related to Hacktoberfest, but it's still kind of cool. Did you want to kick off with that?
Yeah, sure. So I'll share my screen in a sec. I'm going to talk about both the community contributed performance improvement and the things that were developed by the core team. So let's start with the core team. Currently, the core team is working on making Checkov a multi-threaded CLI or multi-process, since it's in Python. Up until today, Checkov had one main process and thread that if it scanned, for example, a plan file or Terraform file or any kind of other file, it wouldn't utilize multi-threads to read multiple files at once, or multiple threads to run through multiple infrastructure as codes at once, or to download multiple modules. And our team is working to solve each of one of those analysis patterns by parallelizing file scanning, parallelizing specific manifest framework scanning, and the next PR to come is parallelizing the download of external modules. So you'll see a lot of things coming in. So 2/3 of those are already merged to latest. One gap that we currently have is they're only working on Mac and Linux. Those all multi-process work, and we are to contribute to performance enhancements in Checkov in Windows later on. So let's focus on community contributed performance improvement. So I'll share my screen.
Let me know when you've got it.
All right. All right, so we had a few. Let's go from the simple to the more serious one. So this is done by Anton Grubel. So one thing that I want to be thankful for is that Anton is a great contributor and he just joined our company. So welcome, Anton. This performance enhancement was performed a few days before he joined our company, and it's
that's just getting ahead. That's just getting ahead of the workload there, isn't it?
Yeah.
A few days before. Thank you very much, Anton.
Yeah. So one thing that we had when we analyzed IAM policies in CloudFormation and in Terraform using our integration with a project called Cloudsplaining is we actually duplicated all of the objects of the IAM policies, creating higher memory footprint and multiple iterations over the same policy. And that happened because we had a usage of deep copy to JSON objects, which represents the IAM policies. So let's say that you want to grant access to S3 bucket to your team member. What Checkov would have done behind the scene is actually duplicating this object over and over again, not showing multiple results, showing it only once, but duplicating each and every object and scanning it more than once. So if you see here, we have a deep copy that I had here, one sec, that Anton has successfully removed. I'm going to show it in a sec after going through the tests.
Fairly sizable contribution.
Yes, it is. All right. So one thing is instead of iterating over the same policy over and over again, we added a cache to the policy. So if it's created more than once or scanned more than once or referenced more than once in the Terraform code, we'll cache the results. So if you have a very complex JSON object, you'll scan it only once. And another thing that we did is to remove deep copy from the code wherever there is an IAM policy. This specific change only impacted users that are using IAM policies in infrastructure as code, and you can see the improvement is taking much less time than before. The second improvement is done by Larry, and Larry has focused on Terraform plan analysis. On Terraform plan analysis, we're also scanning JSON files. Let's open PyCharm. So over here, I've already scanned a set of Terraform plans that contains our own backend. When you're scanning a huge Terraform plan, it can be scanning megabytes or tens of megabytes of plan that represents your entire production environment. This is actually the stats from our production environment, scanning our own Terraform code. And the code here shows that one of the heaviest methods is get beginning and start of a code block. It took 60% of the execution time. It took us to, whenever we scan Terraform plan, it took us 60% of the compute time was the ability to get the specific lines of code that represents where there is a misconfiguration. So let's say that you have a misconfigured S3 bucket. 60% of the time was not the analysis itself, but just fetching the right lines. And the reasons for that is because Terraform is built as a graph. When we're scanning a single Terraform plan file, which is very big, we're doing a recursion that is iterating and finding the different dependencies of each resource before the analysis. The contribution that Larry have made have removed the execution of the get, beginning, and end from 60% of the execution time to 0 point something, so insignificant.
Wow.
So if we see it in statistics, we can see that the entire time of the execution of the plan analysis was in milliseconds 45,000, where most of it was the get, beginning, and end mark. And I've run Profiler after that, and you can see that it took 2/3 of that. And get, beginning, and end, the method still exists in the master code, but it's just a non-significant 0 point something, not even listed. So this contribution have kicked us really far on plan analysis. And as you go to bigger files of plans, bigger than the one that I have for my own environment, you'll see even better improvement. What Larry have reported on is going from 26 minutes to a few seconds. Let's see how it looks like. So 22 minutes to 32 seconds, or 26 to 14 seconds.
That's
so
insane.
You can see it's pretty significant. And Larry have mentioned that if we will utilize this enhancement in JSON scanning, in CloudFormation, in other manifests that are represented in JSON, such as CloudFormation and ARM templates, we might get an improvement there too. So the whole change was about, instead of working with regular expressions to understand what's the beginning and the end using rfind, what Larry have implemented is actually a search algorithm, a simple binary search algorithm, searching for the start cursor and the end cursor in the lines of code. So it's simple, but it's genius because you don't do a string search and you get a exponentially better performance.
That's like the first thing you learn in programming school is like a binary search.
Yeah,
right.
but if you're writing Python for too many years, you're used to just put rfind, string search, etc. So you forgot to work it out in the sensible way. So
first thing you forget as well.
yeah.
Yeah, like you only need to brush search algorithms off for Google interviews, right? That's pretty much the only place they're used.
Yeah, I promise that you'll never hear me saying that in Bridgecrew interviews. So since Larry have mentioned that, I know that there is another contribution that we're going to talk about later, but in one of the later contributions, Json Scanning was implemented, and the suggestion that Larry have raised to move this performance improvement from Terraform plan to all of the different manifests in JSON have actually happened there. So we both scan JSON, and we're going to talk about it, and we actually improved the performance all across JSON frameworks. So it's a significant, very significant one. The currently most heavy performance issue that we have is around multi-threading of modules downloads. Expect a fix for that to arrive by the end of next week. And by then, all of Checkov will be multi-threaded and much faster. So that's about multi-processing and performance improvement in
that rocks.
Checkov in Hacktoberfest.
I can think of so many places, like even just the work I did, I'd say recently, but it wasn't that recent now, on basic Helm support in Checkov. We have a section that literally goes through, because when you do a Helm template, you get a single document containing multiple Kubernetes documents with the 3 dashes, and we kind of go through, and we're using regex to find each section of those documents to break it apart into, and then reading a few lines down to work out what the resource name is, and calling, splitting those out so we can find out which file the original template would have come from, and things like that. Yeah, I should imagine, not that it's particularly slow because we're not dealing with, megabytes and megabytes of Helm usually, but I should imagine there's probably some efficiencies to be had there as well.
Yeah, totally.
It just shows the kind of, you don't know what you don't know. The process flow map you created there within your IDE to show how much time was spent in each function within Python, that is actually new to me. I knew there were tools that could do it, but I didn't know it was native, like parsed and diagrammed in the IDEs. That's pretty cool.
So it's actually, I love to use it on PyCharm, the paid edition, which you can get for free if you're a student. For those who are students and are listening, you have a profiler that can do a call graph. So it really helps to identify the hard parts of performance, and it also has support for multi-threaded, so you can see which thread is getting you locked, etc. So, super useful tool, and mainly used when you have production issues, but also just for
very cool. Yeah, I'm gonna have a play with that and see if there's something VS Code based to do the same, because that's really, really cool.
Sweet.
I see Steve has had a subtle sticking with the same black hooded theme. I see you've had a subtle background change during Barak's demo.
Just to try to keep on theme. Sort of stay dressed up. But more importantly,
you on the dark side or the light side?
I'm in kind of a Skywalker-y, not too sure where I sit at the moment. Well, I'm just going to expose. See, behind all of these Jedis,
yeah,
is a beer fridge.
They're protecting your beer. This is completely acceptable.
And then back defending it.
Is it that time already? There we go.
All right, that was good. What's our next thing?
I guess the next.
Sorry, bro. Go for it.
The thing that would go most natively next would be the Json scanning, I think, because it's both done a performance improvement and a very cool feature.
Completely agree.
So I'm gonna jump in there because I was sharing my thing. Ding dong. All right. This is, in a way, this is still you, Barak, because this is your blog article. You can see your face up there from the 19th of October. You're highlighting a Hacktoberfest open source contribution from Brent. How do I say that? Suze? Do you know how to say his last name?
I would say Souza, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
I'm with the Souza team.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
hang on.
confusing, isn't it? Right? Brent Rancher.
Not this. No, oh, that's not going to
also
work, is it?
There we go.
The other side does say Souza.
Right.
Hang on.
So that guy extends what we're doing on top of a normal infrastructure as code to be able to scan arbitrary JSON, which is huge. And this is quite cool because it goes through, I like the TLDR, thanks to Brent. But you go down and in here, you have an example of where you can secure GitLab. And I thought this was pretty cool because you can see the response is looking at the state of configuration of the file. And did you write this, Barak, this example, or did this one that Brent wrote?
Brent wrote a very similar one. I think
Okay.
he used a different serial example.
And
So the idea is quite cool.
Sorry, Steve.
Okay.
This is something
Yeah.
like when we were talking about it right before this office hours, that it sounds like, so what? I can scan JSON. I have to write rules, and yet it has like a billion different use cases, right? It's really powerful.
Well, that's where my Kubernetes brain went, right? I've got there's another article from Red Hat here saying better Kubernetes security from 2020 through OPA, but it's saying the exact same thing, talking about how you can use Rego, and Gatekeeper accepts the JSON that comes from the Kubernetes API and runs these Rego rules against it. And there is no reason now why you couldn't do exactly the same thing using an admission controller, scanning Kubernetes JSON, writing rules for Kubernetes, doing the same thing. Like this is a pretty simple one because the JSON you're getting is just a list of things. So the rule down here is pretty tidy. Written in Python, you can just see that all it's doing is looking to say, get approvals before merge from the JSON, and if it's there, it's failed. Or sorry, if it's less than 2, it's failed. Otherwise, it's passed. So we're good, right? Because we're checking to see if there's 2 approvers. Pretty straightforward. Just to be certain, I went over here and I did it. I created it and I tested it. So merge a request, external direct, and I ran it, and it's pretty straightforward. So now I've got my failed CKV GitLab 2 merge request require at least 2 approvals, 1, and I just copied exactly the same code. Out of my own curiosity, I went and created custom Kubernetes, and what did I call it? CPU limits. So then I just went and got JSON for an deployment I had running. And it's almost, I think with a little bit of tinkering, I could have almost cut and pasted from the existing CPU limits check. I could probably write a script that would convert them all really quickly to JSON, and then we'd have full JSON Kubernetes support in a very, very small amount of time. But it works well. So if I scan this cloud.json, which is my Cloudflare from my own account, it fails because it should fail because it doesn't have CPU limits. You can see it'll just have the blank resources there. And then I, being me, checked it against the one I did in the blog. That's the one that I had correct. That passes because it's got CPU limits. So it was, and that's the JSON version of it that I exported using the Kubernetes API just to see how well will this work.
Right.
There's my resources.
Previously, we'd have had to kind of get the API to convert back into, we'd have to take a load of the crap out of it that the API gives us back when it's a real resource, and we'd have to convert it into some kind of YAML, right, to feed it back into the Kubernetes scanner.
Well, it's funny you say that because I'm working on an admission controller now, and I have a little thing that flips all my JSON into YAML. Seeing as we just talked about performance, not exactly the best thing to do.
Right.
And now that this is there, it probably would be faster for me to write something that converts our rules so that I can process it on the spot as it arrives as an admission controller, and that'd be way better. But that's not. I think that's pretty awesome because it gives us that kind of parity, the capability of parity, or probably the parity with OPA, given what you can do. You can write limitless Kubernetes checks, but it doesn't stop there. Like the GitLab is a great example. Anything that exists, any API that returns you JSON that is in a declarative protocol means you can write rules for it.
Yeah, and it has the upsides that are a little harder to achieve in Rego. You can debug Python policies. You can put a breakpoint. You can put a unit test on top of it more easily, and you can integrate it with CI systems because you have all sort of outputs that are used in CI, for example, JUnit, XML, Sarif, etc., that are integrated with your pipeline.
And people know how to code in Python.
And people knows how to code in Python. Yeah. That's correct.
Rego. Rego is a wonderful language, but
I think that one of the interesting things that Brent have tried to accomplish using this pull request, and you can see it on the pull request description of this contribution, is that he tried to confront with supply chain attacks, actually, by making sure that you have a number of approvers and a set of best practices configured on your GitLab settings. So even if you have a supply chain attack, if you have more approvers in the way, you would expect that someone would look at it and approve it.
That is super smart. And it's almost like supply chain attacks are something that we're talking about a lot this year.
You possibly think why?
Can't imagine why that is.
No idea.
So that was a bit brief, but I hope that if I didn't miss anything, I'm happy to hand over.
I think it's like you said, super powerful. Did you want to maybe, for anyone listening, something that Steve touched on there? He is currently hacking on a admission controller for Kubernetes using Checkov because it's easier to write Checkov policies, especially with this, than it is some of the alternatives for securing Kubernetes. If you have any thoughts, and I'm not just going to throw you under the bus, but inundated with developer ideas here, because I'm going to say the same for customized support, which I'm hacking on at the moment. If you have any thoughts on how Checkov, or what you would like to check with Checkov if it was an admission controller, like let us know. Like slack.bridgecrew.io, come and join Codified Security Slack, reach out to us on Twitter. Same if you have any thoughts on customized support. Love to hear some people's strong opinions on that while I'm kind of hacking my way through it. Also, issue 568, while we're talking about kind of things that are bubbling up through people's minds, which is about kind of support for Pulumi. That conversation's recently got a bit of a bump with shout out to Space Oddity, I guess, if you pronounce it differently, for kind of saying like they'd like to get involved and contribute, and they've given us some pointers as to ideas around the preview commands in Pulumi, which gives a JSON output format that might have a schema that we might be able to do something with. So
nice.
Yeah, super exciting. Not just kind of things that are already closed and merged, like super exciting stuff that's going on as well.
Awesome.
Talking of things that have closed and merged, I guess my pick, and we've already kind of covered it a little bit, is, he says, sharing his screen.
Roll. There you go. Boom,
so
bong.
There is a standard in XML for understanding a software supply chain, again, because that's what we're talking about in the industry this month, and last month, and the month before. there is, and I wasn't actually familiar with this, so kind of every day is a school day. There is a software bill of materials format called Cyclone DX. And if you kind of go to the cyclonedx.org website, and you can go straight to use cases and examples, and it kind of provides a schema for defining every application, every dependency, every piece of firmware, every operating system, every services on top of them, specific files and libraries, which you can also in the standard kind of embed the exact SHA or exact, fingerprint of those particular files or those libraries, to be absolutely sure you're consistent with what you think is running in your environment. And it's a way of kind of putting all this together in a single defined inventory. Like, this is the software bill of materials for our project or our application, or, all of that good stuff. And as of Hacktoberfest, we now support outputting in this Cyclone DX XML format, which is super, super cool. And, we actually got talking. James from the Bridgecrew team was at a conference with us in London at the National DevOps Conference, and we were talking about Cyclone DX with another of the attendees there, and they've kind of come and got involved and committed these changes. So thank you very much again for the contribution. I'm gonna do a really quick test, because a demo, because it's really easy to demonstrate. It literally is what you'd expect for any other Checkov scan. So let me make this bigger. So if we just do Checkov-D dot like we normally would, you'll see I am in a new copy of TerraGoat with a couple of changes I've made, but you can see it's just a regular TerraGoat. And yeah, if we do Checkov-D local, and then we just do output type of Cyclone DX, what it'll do is it will take all the Checkov checks, it'll take all the specific components that we find in Terraform, and what you will end up with is this Cyclone DX compatible blob of XML. So you can see, I mean, my human XML parsing abilities aren't great, but you can see that, we have the specific schema extension for vulnerabilities. It's a Cyclone DX data. The source name for this is Checkov. We have all the resources you'd expect from the Checkov outputs. We have the descriptions. We have the recommendation links. And so, yeah, this allows us to generate Cyclone DX schema, which is super cool. And, maybe really beneficial to people that already have kind of Cyclone DX in their workflows for the rest of the security teams and things like that. We did have an open question for the community. If anyone knew of an open source like Cyclone DX viewer or renderer, that'd be super, super cool as well, to kind of demonstrate this in a slightly less text in terminal way.
Well, there's isn't there an XQ like JQ? Because you could have piped it too, and then at least it wouldn't look like a complete disaster.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah,
I think there is one.
You
no,
can.
You have it.
I won't have it by default. I'll need to brew install it, won't I?
Yeah. Don't do it now.
I think that it's meant to be used if you're using Defect Dojo. It has a SBOM capability. I think that Taylor from our team is checking that out to see if it's compatible. But if someone in the community have checked that before.
So Cyclone DX can be consumed by Defect Dojo, but also Kenna, which does aggregation of vulnerabilities, Threadfix. These are all competitors to each other. There's one other
Sonotype.
Sonotype. Well, I think Sonotype they may have suggested.
Is the contributor.
And I think Zero North. I think like the main aggregators that cost money also take Cyclone DX, which is like it's like a superseding version of SPDX. SPDX, which is like another bill of materials format that is less popular. Was it ever popular? There's several versions of it. Everyone's kind of bailing on it now for Cyclone DX. But all of like we had this issue back in the Black Duck days because Black Duck has to export SpeedX and CycloneDX to be imported into these where they apply intelligence to this knowledge, right? What's cool about us exporting CycloneDX now is that it puts misconfigurations at the level of CVEs, which is what we've been kind of banging that drum. And Matt, you did a talk at National DevOps specifically about that. So that's cool. If we can now integrate Checkov results and misconfiguration results alongside CVEs that are in these big tools that the SOCs are looking at, that rocks, right? I think it's a great contribution.
Yeah, 100%. And one of those contributions that you can tell, like, it's only going to be made by someone that is deep within infosec, doing infrastructure as code security, like has a need for these things because you know you need them when you need them, kind of thing.
That was obscure what you just said.
Yes. Yes, it was. you don't like. It's one of those features that unless you know you need it, you don't know you need it. You know, unless you're at the point where you are using Checkov and you are doing infrastructure as code security to a level that you go, okay, well, I really need a better visibility across, you know, all of these tools. I don't want to be going into multiple tools to get multiple different parts of my security posture. Like I need it all in one place. We've chosen this standard. I need Checkov to output this format. So yeah, kind of an advanced use case, but super cool.
It is. I think it's really good. I think, and like, as you say, Checkov is kind of a DevOps security tool, but I think when security teams catch wind that there's a possibility to push these configurations into some of their mainstream SOC tools, that's going to make it even more popular.
Yeah, I think maybe a demo for the next office hours, right?
Yeah, we'll get Taylor in once
showing all this information coming together. That'd be super cool.
If we get Taylor on Defect Dojo, he can do some scans of, well, you can do container scanning and you can throw that into Defect Dojo and we can show that in line with Checkov scans. I think it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. Talking of container scans and talking of kind of seeing all of this data together in one place. We've not touched on this, I don't think, in an office hours. So I was just going to kind of quickly call out the Helm Scanner project, which is now live online. It follows on from some ideas we were talking about supply chain security, and kind of treating CVEs and misconfigurations as a single risk thing rather than your CVEs are over here being looked at by the people making the containers and the cloud ops team are over here thinking about misconfigurations. So we were looking at ways to visualize that. And what we ended up with, because basically I wanted to play with graphs, was building graphs out of both the Checkov CKV checks that we get from scanning Helm charts. And then for each Helm chart, we've gone through, and if we find a deployment, for example, we find a daemon set here. If that deployment or pod or daemon set has container images, we then take those container images, download them, scan them with the new Checkov image scanning capability through Prisma Cloud, and also attach those CVEs to that graph. So you can kind of visualize in a single place, a Helm chart from both a CVE and a kind of misconfiguration scenario. And we've put all these live for basically every chart that currently exists on Artifact Hub. So if you go to bridgecrew.github.io/Helm-scanner, it's just a GitHub pages coming from the Helm Scanner GitHub pages branch. And you'll see that basically every chart is available. We have tagged it with all the CVEs and all the Checkov checks. You can also search based on a specific CKV check and get all the ones that match that, or a specific chart name or any of that. And if you just click View Blast Radius Graph, you then get an interactive version, some of which will have CVEs, some won't. We haven't excluded any. We've kind of just put them all in there for for the sake of being able to find your favorite chart. This is my favorite chart.
It looks like a fingerprint.
Just because, yeah, craziness. But yeah, you can see that it kind of, we are hoping, kind of helps you immediately visualize everything related to the security posture of that Helm chart, rather than just thinking about misconfigurations or CVEs. Would love to get feedback if you think it's useful. If you think it's rubbish, let us know on either the GitHub issues page on Helm Scanner, or again, come and find us on Twitter at Bridgecrew.io or in our Slack channel. But yeah, I just thought while we were talking about ways of putting all this data together, you know, CycloneDX is probably going to have a much nicer way of displaying all of this, with multiple sources of information coming from things like, you know, into Defect Dojo. But yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that at the same time. So if looking at pretty graphs made by Helm's charts is your thing, check that out.
I can confirm that Defect Dojo does not have a pretty graph that does this for you.
Everything needs pretty graphs. I think that's now my mission in life. Just taking random pieces of data and seeing how badly I can create open source bokeh based graphs through NetworkX. I think that might be my thing.
It's pretty cool. You just had the GitHub repo up there. And there we go. If you want to contribute, nothing's stopping you, right? It's
yes. By all means, and you will find that the entire web page is actually just, if you go into content and graph and 2021, like they are all here. If you are so inclined to go and play with them. So yeah, that is just a little bit of a continuation from the conversation about supply chain and dependencies and all that good stuff.
That was a good extension from that. Yeah, we set you up.
There you go. And
Yeah.
So they were the kind of big contributions, but you know, we've had a lot of contributions, right, Barak? Are there any others you want to kind of shout out? Oh, muted, dude.
Mute.
Of course I am. There is some small ones that were always asked by the community, and someone decided to pick up the glove. For example, the ability to add guidelines for custom policies. Now it's actually another member of the custom policy class, and you can provide a guideline link to a custom one.
Awesome.
So that would serve you to provide links other than the Bridgecrew documentation when you're creating a custom policy. Another one is Docker file scanning had wrong number lines in some of the checks, and that was fixed. And there was a ton of new checks that were added for AWS, Azure, GCP, and actually also for Oracle Cloud.
Yes.
It's a new cloud provider that we have supported today.
I completely forgot to mention that, didn't I? Our very own James, who is on holiday today. Otherwise, he would be with us with all of his demo of this. But yes, the PR for those interested is 1690, which in itself is pretty cool that we're already on pull request 1690. And yeah, it adds the OCI type provider. You'll see we're starting to add OCI examples to TerraGoat, which you should expect sometime this or next week. Just with simple examples, for example, at the moment, where we have a provider with kind of a password that shouldn't be in there, that will already get caught by the secret scanning if it's a random string, but this will now also get caught by the first example of James's OCI checks, which basically checks that there's no hard-coded OCI private key in the provider config. So yeah, more and more clouds coming, I say every day.
Every day.
Every month.
Okay.
Yeah,
you heard it, Barak.
I'm not going to hold James to that. James, if you're listening, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but yeah, very, very cool.
We haven't seen DigitalOcean yet or Heroku. It's time to have Checkov checks for those two.
That's true. I got asked for DigitalOcean at Cloud Engineering Summit as one of my questions. I said, we did Oracle. Really, I did get asked that. And I was like, okay, cool.
What's kind of cool though, and I didn't share my screen as I was kind of talking through James's thing, so I will now, because you can actually see that to add very simple OCI support, to add a completely different Terraform style support for a different cloud, it's actually not that big a PR. With a single test, defining a new provider, writing a unit check for that simple test. So actually, like, if anyone's looking for a how would I go about writing a basic DigitalOcean support, and then, once it's there, it's a lot easier for the community to kind of see this and write new checks against it and kind of build those checks up. So yeah, not actually crazy. Like, it's how you specify, how you kind of read the data, how you work out whether something is or isn't related to that provider, and then kind of building checks on top of that provider in a very similar way to other Terraform providers. So I think from that alone, yes, it's Oracle. If you don't use Oracle, this is still a super useful PR to kind of understand how you might add other providers really simply. And then just for completion, there was the example provider we were talking about, configuring with a private password. Yeah. Segue over.
Yeah, so overall, we had more than 20 new contributors that have never contributed code to our open source before. And what I was surprised about is that most of the contributions were not about new policies. Most of the contributions were core contributions around performance, new cloud providers, bug fixes. So thanks everyone for getting into the nasty areas of the code of our open source tools and getting your hands dirty on the very hard stuff. And for contributing back. It really means a lot for us. There are already more than 150 different contributors. I will tell you a secret, the core engineering team of Checkov is less than 6 people. So it's amazing to see that.
Like that. How about Alibaba? Yeah.
Secure all of the clouds. Yeah.
Thank you, Anton.
Excellent.
I'm getting excited with all the StreamYard buttons. This is why you shouldn't give me admin access to StreamYard.
I was wondering how you were doing that. I thought I was the only one that had admin access. you get a weird Halloween wizardry.
I should be wearing the cloak, shouldn't I? With the Russian hacker vibe. But yeah, you need to send me that hat, Barak.
Will do.
Awesome. Well, this has been, I guess, unless anyone has anything else, the Hacktoberfest special episode of Codified Security Office Hours. Thank you very much for joining us. If you're catching up after the fact, if you're catching up on YouTube or Twitch or Facebook, and you have questions or comments on any of this, you can find us at slack.bridgecrew.io or reach out at bridgecrew.io on Twitter. And from myself and Steve and Barak, have a good morning, evening, wherever you are.